to be able to be guided, because I really understand there are those moments whereby you can go through aspects, when you have to make very tough financial decisions in some kind of a way that some might even hurt your partners. But all this can only be possible. It can only be possible, I repeat, if you have a pattern that you're following, an entrepreneurial pattern you're following, to ensure that you incorporate it into your pattern. But remember also something that, I normally say that if you're getting a pattern from somebody, it doesn't mean, when it doesn't work out for us, we feel like, no, this maybe it's okay. We feel like business is hard. It's impossible to succeed in business, but you did a copy and paste. The thing is, somebody's pattern is just a foundation for you to build your own pattern, to guide you in your own. It just gives you a starting point to plan. Because sometimes if they tell you that, for example, if me being much into the programming bit of it, if you tell me to design an application, I may not be able to design it from scratch, but if I get to take a look at somebody designing one on a tutorial, it can give me a foundation to design my own that I wish, but I'm not going to copy and paste everything, because dynamics change. Your situation, the reason why you made that decision, there were underlying factors that even some depended on the community you're operating in, because some of these people are operating in the United States, some are in Europe. For you, are in Uganda, Kampala. The challenges that underlying those countries are not the same that we have in Africa. Of course, there could be similarities, but not to the degree like in Africa. So that's why he can take on a certain decision, and it can be favorable to him because of the surroundings. And for you take that very decision he took, and it turns out for the worst. And you curse entrepreneurs, you curse. That's why people reach a point and they hate motivational speakers in some kind of way, because they say, they're not practical, they speak. But why? Sometimes they speak things, we need to understand. That's why when we are looking at some of these business tips and quotes, it's very quite key and important to understand, where was this person hence coming from? What influenced this person to really say that, okay, I conclude this and this, well, that is what is the most important bit of it. Well, let's get into these inspirations real quick. Well, and of course, we had the first quote that was mentioning something to do with being adaptable in some sense, adaptation to all perspectives. If you don't adapt to society, well, then you might find real issues. In Mexico, there are all these stories, known for, the mafia beat, the cartels beat, that if you're a police person and you're actually good, you may not survive on the job for long. You can either be killed by the people that are controlling, because the mafias themselves control the government.
Yeah.
So if you decide to say that, I'm going to work for the people, I'm going to be just, it may never work out for you. So you find that if you're pursuing a career as a police officer, you have to be a mafia. You have to adapt. That is, if you're to have your job prolonged and you have a family to take care of. So being good may not pay you off. If you've just joined the system, probably, I'm assuming you've been in Mexico and you were away for some time. Probably you were in Europe. You had gone for studies. Now you come back as a police officer, and you want to, because you've been in Europe and you know that integrity is key. How people view you publicly is key. And then you come to a country where that doesn't really work, which costs you at some time.
You have to go dirty at some point. You have
though it doesn't mean that it's right.
Of course, it doesn't mean that it's right, but you have to put the energy where you feel is necessary. Once you're working in a place that requires a lot of competition. Take a quench fuba. Go also be good on that.
Yeah.
Because some places really need you to survive. Survival skills.
Survival skills.
Yeah. So you don't have to be soft. Speak up.
You have to move with the wind. You don't move opposite the direction of the wind. Yeah.
And that is interesting. So I was thinking to myself, and I was thinking why controversies in society. And of course, now there is a lot of competition between women now want to be more vocal. But then at some point we forget that we are women. Yeah. And of course, when it comes to pay, they want to be paid the same. They want to have the same. Women, actually, the reason as to why there was this whole thing of gender equality that came up and the like is because women had a lot of potential, so it didn't mean that they had to be superior.
Yeah,
I think that's the only thing that we forget. That is why, if anything that comes up, women are active. They are putting on placards and they're advocating women.
So they want to take over the whole thing.
Yeah, but you forget that we're men. We're women who don't operate the same way. Men can be rough. Yeah.
The women could be tougher.
They could be tougher, but the men could be rougher.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yes, we have to acknowledge, yes, women emancipation, but how far have we gone to really want to fight for power? Yeah. If power is good in the right hands, but if in the wrong hands, it could be destructive.
Well, absolutely. Destructive in all aspects of socio-economic and political transformation of society.
I'm not saying feminism is bad because I'm a lady, I'm a woman.
Yeah.
But then to what extent are we pushing that?
Pushing that.
Yes. I mean, we make ourselves so vulnerable to the point that in anything we are...
Okay, could we call it the aspect of entitlement?
Yeah.
You feel entitled? And it's even when you take a look at the Standard Development Goals, SDG 5, it's in line with that. Financial, talking about gender equality, in political inclusion.
But we know we can never be equal.
Of course, we can never be equal by nature. By nature, it's just about the forces, global forces currently, that are pushing towards that. That if you be a country and you're probably against that, it will frustrate your growth prospects,
Now, like we could see a token instance of the president of Tanzania. Her being a lady doesn't rule out the fact that she has to involve men.
Absolutely.
She has to. I mean, you have to at one point or the other. It can't be entirely a female-dominated empire, you know, and making the rules. You have to involve men because they were there before, even in the creation time. Men were men were there before women.
Exactly.
So they have more knowledge. Yeah.
And I think that also brings about a narrative recently, because statistics still reveal that for a country to have stable economic growth, it should create a balance between, because today we are looking at financial inclusion for women.
Yeah.
There ought to be equal opportunities for both the boy child, talking about the girl child. And because if you give one side the opportunity, you're frustrating the potential of another to contribute to the state coffers.
We are actually now prioritizing the girl child more than the boy child. Have you noticed?
Yeah, but of course, still, in terms of financial inclusion, there is still a challenge, most especially for the female perspective.
And there is.
Yeah, because the reports reveal that the 2017 survey up to 2022 reveals, of course, we're yet to see another one later on, the FinScope survey about when we talk about mobile money, the user rate for women is 25% and men are holding it at 38%. But of course, if we are to take a step back a little bit from 29, when the first FinScope, when we had a FinScope study, which revealed that 30% of the population was excluded financially, and of this 30%, women contributed the biggest percentage. So from 29 to 20, we had another FinScope study in 2013, which revealed that financial inclusion had reduced to 15%. So that means there was positivity in terms of, Now we come to from 2013, we had another one in 2018, where we saw 23% of the women excluded and 23% of women were excluded and 22% were men.
The percentage went on reducing.
But it was one. But now you get to realize that the more, because at first the inclusion perspective was driven with physical means, brick and mortar, financial services, the physical perspective. We saw results, but as we evolved to through financial inclusion, with access to digital, through the digital transformation, now the men started to take an upper hand. So could we say that we're still having a challenge for women to adapt to technology?
Yes, I must say. Why I'm saying this, because now you realize that now that the people we're talking about are people in the rural areas, how many of the women can have digital literacy?
Of course, there are quite few, because you find that a woman can actually have their phone into the son's line. Their phone line into the son's phone, but however much they make transactions, they are limited, because that's not your phone at the end of the day. And also, yesterday we were talking about women being burdened with domestic work which pays less, and part of the reason as to why there is a lot of inclusion is in line with income generation, because a lady would only make a choice to participate in an income generating activity based on what am I going to forego when it comes to my work which I do domestically that doesn't pay. So they look at what is going to make them comfortable to keep with the responsibilities and also that. So it will drive their reason to participate in the economic activities, which drives them into a state of being excluded further.
Well, of course, I was looking at a report here in, talking about Ankole women, how they have actually opted for an investment club.
Yes.
But then these are women in rural areas, those far-end places where in a month, the highest she can have on herself is maybe 20,000.
The highest in a month?
Yes, but they can have the highest they can have is 20,000. So they came up with an investment club, and of course, with the help of people that have been in for quite some time, and in a month they save 4,000.
In a month, you save 4,000 in a month. So how much money can you save? So a year, that's so in a year you save about, if you to make 12 by 4, that's how much money you save.
That's quite little money, and I don't think it can actually do something interesting or maybe something productive.
It's little money.
So you realize now they're saving for survival.
Wow. And you see,
in 5 years, they're able to save 240,000. What is 240,000 in our new Uganda
in
now?
5 years' time? And remember, if you're to consider the depreciation value, which is it can be also a challenge in this case. That's I mean, I think that shows you if they're able to save 4,000 in a month, their rate in terms of participating in income generating activities. As we mentioned, that most of the businesses, most especially the micro, which have a turnover of just 15 million a year, they are run by youth and women, micro. As we proceed, as we go to intermediary, talking about incomes of 100 million annually, 360, we're seeing men coming and taking precedence. And another challenge with these women, that when they save this money into those circles, there is something very hard for that money to leave the circles, because that is some sort of informal way. And that money is being transferred to a formal economy, whereby we can see transactions taking place. It's actually making the actual economic transactions. There is a hardship in that line.
And one of the reasons as to why they say they, decided to have an investment club is the fact that they cannot entirely rely on the men.
They can't entirely rely on men.
That was the reason. That was the only reason.
Okay.
Yeah? Just to support the man. Just to support the man.
To support the man.
Yeah. But of course, you see, now, the thing is, like, maybe I could have buy books for my kids, buy pencils.
Yeah.
But this is not the money you can actually invest. 240,000. What in 5 years, 250,000 will be like 10K.
Absolutely. With the rate of the depreciation against the shilling depreciating against the dollar, of course, it makes the domestic currency be of less value as time proceeds. And that brings me to also a realization that most women prefer informal kind of ways of acquiring financial services. And it brings me to a question that could there be a possibility that women are not served to their expectations? Their priorities are not put into much more consideration, because when it comes to acquiring loans, insurance, they laugh so much more of approaching it from the informal perspective, and that is quite worrying. And I feel like this should pose a lot of the policy makers, most especially when it comes to financial institutions, establishing financial institutions. What is the foundation? Talking about the gender gaps, and also it makes me feel like that even the microfinance institutions have not taken time to tailor efficient products that women can actually have, in terms of them being able to access these loans. That, let me say Microfinance X is launching a product, Z, for the women in this rural area. Because with financial inclusion, bit of it has two perspectives. If you are in the rural areas, you're excluded. And if you, if you're a woman, you're also excluded. And that and that has been witnessed. Because how can we? Because what's the difference between 38% and 25%? If you do the math,
13%.
So we have a 13% gap. That is big between men and women in talking about digitization. So when you mention something to do with digital inclusion, that is also quite key. But also there is also an issue when it comes to the cost of technology.
Yeah, it's quite expensive. For most women.
For most women.
So you can imagine now a person who is able to save 4,000. How do you think in 5 years they can't even afford the new phone that we have in Uganda, the new phone, new phone. So how do you expect such a person to involve themselves, unless probably they have they are lucky enough that they have taken their kids to school and maybe they involve them. The bad thing we have is children also do not involve their parents into these things, you know.
How,
The youth.
involving their parents into digital inclusion?
Yeah.
No, because I think that also clearly shows you the perspective of the gap between the children and the parents, because not giving time to understanding your child, all this comes in line. But anyway, I just don't want to get into that. That's a whole line of a family talk. But the bigger picture in here is that for the women perspective, because away from them not being able to, having issues to when it comes to affordability due to their expenses in card and technology, we have the internet costs. But of course, grateful that the government is actually trimming it down the cost. Because if you can see, internet in government agencies has now been cut. The price has been cut 50%. So we anticipate that this could actually cut across all sectors, but all in favor of the women, because we know their potential. If their potential is actually entirely unleashed, what they are capable to do for this country, Uganda. So the microfinance institutions should definitely also tailor products which are largely in favor with the women, whereby women should get to start to desire to approach more formal means when it comes to financial inclusion.
Yeah, I do understand. But of course, you see, also the microfinance institutions are sort of challenged at some point. For you to award someone a loan, you also have to know what they're going to use
that loan for.
That loan for. Are they going to buy food? Are they going to buy a meal that they have been hoping to have? I mean, there has to be something that, when we were getting, people were applying for these loan schemes, you had to have a really convincing write-up for you to get that loan. So there has to be a convincing something that, when someone gives you a loan, they know you're going to use it for productivity purposes.
For productivity purposes.
Yes. So there are challenges at one point or the other. So someone acquires a loan and they're not able to pay up. You don't know what they use it for. So there has to be follow-ups. Yeah. So that is why in most cases, some people prefer giving these women real products like seedlings, improved, something like that. Because at the end of the day, unless they're going to sell the seedlings, because once you give someone a seedling, they're going to plant and it's going to grow. It's visible. But for cash, for money, you don't know. You cannot tell.
Okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely right. In there, of course, looking at women, financial inclusion for women, and of course, seeing the responsible stakeholders ensuring that they make this a reality for men. How do we bridge the gap from 25 to at least make it reach about 33%? At least having just the 2% difference would be much more fair. How can men be at 38% when it comes to financial inclusion and in the digital space as compared to women? And yet we're talking about financial inclusion from the digital perspective. That's where the future is. I mean, we're talking about fintech, financial technology. Of course, tomorrow we shall be having a fintech expert as we break down this further. Well, it's exactly 27 minutes past 8. Smart Means Business. I'm Andrew Barija with Basi Katsumi. Well, for now, we'll take a short break and we'll return, of course, with business in sports and entertainment.